exile to the greener grass, searching for the uncertain haze.
Hi, welcome to Chom's Talks. I'm Choms, and this is a place where facts meet perspective. Here, we dig into the information, break it down, and then talk through it, what it might mean, clearly separating what we know from what we think. Because everyone has opinions, but here they're built on understanding the facts first. Today, we're talking about Kentucky's data center boom and the coming backlash. Right now in Kentucky, something massive is being built. Not stadiums, not factories, not housing developments, buildings filled wall to wall with machines that will never sleep. No customers, no storefronts, no visible activity from the outside, just power, heat, and computation. And most people will never step inside one. But these buildings may soon help determine how much you pay for electricity, how much water your region uses, and what your communities look like in 10 years. Because Kentucky is becoming one of America's fastest growing data center hubs, and the expansion has only just begun. To understand what is happening in Kentucky, you first have to understand what a modern data center actually is. It's not a tech office. It's not a software company. It is infrastructure. Physical, industrial infrastructure designed to do one thing: run the digital world. Everything from streaming video to banking systems to artificial intelligence. Thousands of servers stacked in rows, cooling systems running nonstop, backup generators always on standby. Unlike most industries, these facilities don't close. They don't slow down at night. They don't take weekends off. They run continuously, which means they consume continuous energy. And that demand is why Kentucky is suddenly in the middle of a national shift. So why Kentucky? Kentucky wasn't originally a tech hub, but data centers don't choose locations based on tradition. They choose based on three things: power, land, geography. Kentucky has all three. Louisville has become a major corridor for operators like Flexential and Maximum Colo. Lexington supports regional infrastructure through telecom and hosting networks. And Northern Kentucky, especially around Florence, connects directly into national data routes through major enterprise facilities like Cyrus One. In Western Kentucky, companies like Core Scientific operate high-density computing infrastructure designed for nonstop processing. But now a new phase is beginning, a hyperscale phase. A massive new facility is already under construction in the Louisville metro area. And in Madison County, officials approved a 2,000-acre campus tied to an undisclosed tech company. On paper, it looks like economic development. Jobs, taxes, investment. But underneath that, something more complicated is forming. Because these facilities don't just occupy land, they consume infrastructure. The infrastructure has limits. What happens when multiple counties all reach that limit at the same time? The power grid problem. Every data center eventually becomes a power story because electricity is the foundation of everything inside. And AI has changed the scale entirely. Modern hyperscale facilities can consume as much electricity as small cities. But here's the structural problem. Data centers can be built in under a year. Power plants take several years. Transmission lines take even longer. That mismatch is creating a growing strain on regional planning. Utilities are now forced to predict how much demand is coming, when will it arrive, and who is responsible if they get it wrong. Because if utilities overbuild infrastructure based on projections and those projections fall short, someone still has to pay for that excess capacity. And that someone is often the public. Electricity customers, homeowners, such as you and me, small businesses. So the real question becomes, are we expanding the grid for people or redesigning it for machines? Water, heat, and the physical cost. Electricity is only part of the equation because servers don't just consume energy. They produce heat, and the heat must be controlled at an industrial scale. Many data centers rely on evaporative cooling systems that use millions of gallons of water per day. That creates a second pressure point, water infrastructure. In some regions, that raises concerns about long-term supply sustainability, especially during peak demand periods. But for residents, the impact isn't measured in gallons. It's felt in changes to local environments, more infrastructure, more pumping, more demand on municipal systems, and above all, more industrial footprint in areas that once had none. And for nearby communities, the change isn't just environmental, it's sensory as well. What's it like to live next to the machines? Residents near data center developments describe a very different reality than the one promised in economic projections. Not just construction, not just growth, but constant industrial presence. Cooling systems that run 24 hours a day, backup generators that activate during peak load or emergencies, a persistent low-frequency hum that doesn't stop. And once these facilities are built, they rarely stay small. They expand. Additional phases, additional servers, additional demand. And that means the footprint grows over time. Then the question becomes, when does development stop being temporary and become permanent transformation? Kentucky's not in this alone, though. Across the United States, a national race is underway, a race to build AI infrastructure faster than the competitors. Some policymakers argue this is essential by national competitiveness. Others warn the cost is being quietly shifted onto local systems because every new data center adds pressure to electricity grids, water systems, land use planning, long-term infrastructure, budgets. All of that adds up. And those systems are local, but the demand is global. And that mismatch is where conflict begins. Let's take a look at Utah. In Utah, Meta Platforms is building one of the largest hyperscale data center campuses in the country in Eagle Mountain. This is not a single facility. It is a multi-phase industrial expansion measured in millions of square feet. Supporters call it investment and innovation. Critics, however, call it rapid industrial transformation on a massive scale. But regardless of perspective, one fact stands out. Once infrastructure reaches this scale, it becomes difficult to reverse. Not because it's controversial, but because it becomes essential. Virginia is the future that already exists. If Utah shows what's coming, Virginia shows what's happening when it never stops. Northern Virginia, especially Loudoun County, is now the most concentrated data center region in the world. Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, Google all operate massive facilities there. Entire districts are now defined by server infrastructure. Over time, this has created long-term pressure on land use planning, power capacity expansion, transmission infrastructure, and regional utility systems that must continuously scale to meet demand. Residents and analysts increasingly point to long-term infrastructure strain as part of ongoing debates about electricity costs and system expansion. Because once a grid becomes dependent on data centers, everything else has to adapt around them. Back in Kentucky, the same transformation is unfolding in real time, quietly, project by project, county by county. On one side, economic development, investment, infrastructure, modernization. On the other, water demand, energy strain, land transformation, long-term cost distribution. But underneath both sides is a deeper issue. This isn't just about data centers. It's about allocation of electricity, of water, of land, and ultimately of control. The question is no longer whether this technology is coming. It's already here. The question is, when the digital world expands this fast, what part of the physical world has to give way to make room for it? And who gets to decide? For most of human history, growth was easy to see. A new factory, a new highway, a new bridge, a new neighborhood. People could look at what was being built and understand why it existed. From the outside, they often appear silent. No crowds, no storefronts, no products rolling off assembly lines. Just enormous buildings filled with machines. Yet inside those walls, they power the modern world. Every search, every video, every online purchase, every cloud backup, every AI prompt. And that's what makes this moment so unique. Because Kentucky is not simply deciding whether to build more facilities. Kentucky is deciding what role it wants to play in the infrastructure of the digital age. Supporters see opportunity, billions in investment, construction jobs, tax revenue, a chance to attract industries that may define the next generation of economic growth. Critics, however, see something else: growing energy demand, pressure on water systems, industrial expansion into rural communities, and the possibility that local residents could absorb costs while global technology companies capture much of the benefit. Both sides are looking at the same buildings, but they're imagining very different futures. And that's where the coming backlash may emerge. Not because people oppose technology. Most people use technology every day. The backlash comes when communities feel decisions are made around them instead of with them. When growth happens faster than planning. When infrastructure expands faster than public understanding. When the benefits feel distant, but the impact feels local. History shows that major infrastructure booms often begin with excitement. Then come the questions, then debates, then demands about accountability. Railroads, highways, manufacturing corridors, energy pipelines, and now data centers. Kentucky may be approaching that phase right now. Not a fight over technology itself, but a fight over who pays, who benefits, and who gets a voice in the decision. Because the real story isn't about the servers. It's about trade-offs. Every society makes them, every generation. The difference is that today's trade-offs are hidden behind walls of steel, fiber optics, cooling systems, and algorithms. The physical foundations of a digital world. And while the internet may feel weightless, it has never been weightless. It runs on land, it runs on water, it runs on electricity, and increasingly, it runs through places like Kentucky. Years from now, people may look back on this period and realize they were watching the construction of something far larger than a collection of buildings. They were watching the creation of a new layer of national infrastructure, one that could shape economies, communities, and public resources for decades to come. The question is not whether the future arrives. Construction crews are already pouring the concrete. Permits are already being approved. The power lines are already being planned. The future is already under construction. The only remaining question is whether communities will help shape it or simply adapt to it after it's built. And that is the conversation Kentucky is only beginning to have. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, follow, and share it with someone who wants to understand forces reshaping the modern world. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking questions that matter. I'm Chomps, and this is Chomps Talk. Bye.